Thanks, Josh. And also, I definitely want to thank IMX for this virtual platform. And just want to say, first of all, this is not my office. This is actually I get the pleasure in being in my hometown of Jeffersonville, Indiana, and we have this wonderful Howard Steamboat Museum right here. And for those of you that don't know, the museum is truly a celebration of the boats that the Howard family built starting around the mid 1800s. The shipyard is just immediately across the road from this beautiful, this is a gorgeous house. I love that myself, but they are known as the premier boat builder of the time. And around the turn of the 20th century, they became the inland towboat and workboat premier builder in the industry. They were successful for 107 years. After that, the yard changed hands a few times, and then it was known as Jet Boat, which many of us on the conference know, and I spent many a day in there as a alumni of Jet Boat, prongs and barges and boats. So I thought, what better place to be in to talk about battery hybrid innovation in the industry than really kind of the birthplace of where it all started. So please stop by if you get a chance. You're in the Jeffersonville, Indiana area, and stop and see this gorgeous house and everything that they do to celebrate towboats and workboats in the industry. So let's get to the meat of what I want to talk about. First of all, why are we talking about these? And the other presenters talked about a few of these things. I could talk about IMO, I could talk about zero emission ports, all those things, but really for us inland guys, what does that mean, right? That, if you see the emblems that I put down at the bottom right of the slide, the Shells, the BPs, the Totals, they have net zero emission goals by 2050. That's pretty aggressive. And what they do is not the cleanest, right? They have all kinds of upgrades in their plants they can do, and so on and so forth, but they're going to put a lot of pressure not only on their internal facilities, but also who they're using as contractors and service providers, thus inland towboats, tug operators. They're going to put a lot of pressure on them to get to those goals. So next, I just kind of want to walk through what at ABB we see the progression getting us there. And we've been around for over 130 years. We have 1,300 vessels around the world that have our systems installed in it. And we see that, we're at the start right now. Diesel, electric, LNG, methanol, all those types of things, those are here today. But we have to quickly progress to something different when it comes to things like energy storage, short charging. The grid power is much cleaner than the power that you produce on a vessel itself. So once you start introducing that, you get the benefit of that cleaner energy, right? Then from there, we move into fuel cells. And I kind of hate to mention that sometimes for the inland group because we're, again, still way back in the diesel electric LNG kind of stage. But the proof of that technology is happening today. At ABB, we'll have the world's first inland towboat with a fuel cell system in it next year. So the world is progressing there. And then as you see the further progression into 2050 and zero emission, the way that you get to that zero emission with fuel cells is when you start to get to carbon-free hydrogen. A lot of us hear about the offshore wind industry and what is that, what's happening there. That's where you get the green hydrogen, where you get truly zero emission out of the vessels we operate today. Let's dial back just a little bit and let's talk about our industry, right? Part of this industry for over a decade now. Love it. But we typically are slow to change, right? And a lot of the things that make us change are things that we talked about already. Regulations, what the companies that we service are demanding from us, right? So our first progression, like I said before, is the electric world. Right here, I just kind of showed a simple system where you have the generators. Scott has gone through this, and Peter already. But what I really want to make sure people understand is what has circled there in the electric side, right? The electric is the most important because it future-proofs these vessels. Those of us that know these towboats, these inland boats, these things last forever, 30, 40, 50 years. Even Amherst Madison today is still operating paddle wheel boats. So, I mean, these things last for a long time. So if we're looking to build a vessel today, we need to keep future-proof in mind. And this is where I tell people it's most important to have an electric motor as your main propulsion, whatever it may be. And Josh was so kind to send his rendering as well. As you can see, it's traditional shaft line convert versus an L drive or a Z drive situation. But what that allows you to do is it doesn't matter what energy source is behind those electric motors. The electric motor just wants to consume that energy. So you see in the example on the left, we have generators. Still use the diesel engine, possibly for generation of power. The example on the right has the generators, and just like we heard earlier, it could be LNG, it could be diesel. But then we also have batteries installed in there. And it doesn't matter, again, what power is back there because we have electric motors installed. So with that in mind, I really want to talk through this battery revolution and what we got into. And I'm going to touch on the Coast Guard at the same time as with our Made in the Mist project as the first-hand example. But also, I'm going to kind of speed through this a little bit, so I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. I feel that's the most important part of this session. So we can run through all these examples of how to use energy storage, but Josh and the rest of the guys already stated the most important thing of what we do at ABB at first is figure out how do you use the vessel that you have. Is it a fleet boat? Is it a unit towboat? Is it, a shuttle boat on the lower decks? How are you using that particular boat? And we can look at all these areas and how they fit into your application, right? So spinning reserve, again, I call it insurance. Instead of having a generator online or an engine online that you don't need, you have battery there readily available, right? So if you're a standby, you don't have to have any engines running because you have the battery there that would be able to power up immediately. Peak saving, bumpering and holding. This is when I say if you're building a tow, you just have to hold it for a little bit, have somebody throw a line around or a wire around. You can use the batteries for that boost versus bringing another generator online. Dynamic performance, where I love saying ludicrous mode. Power on demand versus waiting for the engine to spool up. You have immediate power. Think of a Tesla compared to a Ford F-250, right? Tesla will blow it off the line because you have that immediate availability of power, as well as electric motor has 100% torque at 0 speed. So you have all that torque right there available for you. And then strategic loading, this is where I call it harmony. This is where you can really level load all those gen sets, level load the system with the battery to make sure you're optimizing the entire system. And then, of course, zero emissions. We've had several projects and currently working on several around the world for all battery towboats and tugs. In these areas, emissions is key. So we are looking at an entire tug and towboat with batteries that has shore power, where they can come back in and while they're waiting for a vessel or while they're in the fleet, right, waiting for a larger boat to come in to switch barges on, they can go ahead and charge. These are things that are out there compared to where we're at today, but they definitely are there. And with that, I just one of the things Josh and I talked about before this was how is the kind of progression with the Coast Guard going, and how are they adopting some of these new technologies? And again, with the Made in the Mist project that we have, which is the first new build all battery ferry in the United States up in Niagara Falls, I would say there's definitely a learning curve, right? I think we can all say that. Really, first adopters always find bumps in the road, and our partner up there at Made in the Mist is definitely a first adopter. With that, and Josh, we were right in the middle of the new ASTM adoption for Coast Guard. We were going through all the approvals when that came along. So with that, we have a lithium-ion system. They were looking at old CFR with lead acid batteries. So we had to get through all that. There's a lot of bumps along the way, and one of the biggest things the ASTM guideline brought along was the safety aspects and what's required for it. A lot of the battery manufacturers that we utilize know the batteries, know how to build them. They're all class approved, but it's really getting the Coast Guard to understand that system and that's where the ASTM adoption really helped them out through that process. So again, I want to make sure I respect the time for Q&A because it's most important. So with that, Josh, I want to hand it back over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, David, and to Peter and Scott. We do have a few questions here. I'm going to go over some of them, group some together. The first one that we've got, and for those of you who don't know, if you should see a Q&A tab up to the side, if you want to enter any questions in there, we'll try to get to as many as we can here. There's two questions here, and Scott, more up your alley with natural gas. You mentioned the low carbon or alternative fuel credits program. Two questions, if you have any insight. First, would that be extended to partially fumigated engines, similar to the one that we showed with the SCF? And two, do you know approximately the timeline for when that will be extended to the marine industry?
I'll answer that two ways. I'll answer both those questions. My belief, it will not cover fumigated systems because it's really driven to zero emissions or very low emissions from that. So my gut level is no. And my answer on the second question is I believe in California and other places that will happen in the next 2 years, and some of that is also requiring lobbying from both the industries. But it's a huge financial changeover. It's source to replace your old equipment. If the industry for both the marine and the rail market to lobby that. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Next question, David, to you first, and Peter, you probably have some input. What do you feel is holding back the adoption of new technology, specifically energy storage, diesel electric, and fuel cells from taking off on the domestic U.S. market?
Well, I guess there's a bunch of ways I know that with Josh. It's a really good question. One is that there is some systems out there that have been installed that are dipping their toe in, right? We in the U.S. are very reluctant to change, and when it comes to that, we're a very mechanically minded industry at the same time. We like our gearboxes, we like our engines, and so taking that leap into electric is usually the first large one that a company has to make. But with that, when we start talking batteries, it's not only just the inland industry, it's just the adoption of batteries in general. That is really picking up steam throughout other industries inside the U.S. And with that, that's what the inland guys want to see, right? That's what it says. When I was at ATBL, we definitely were on the forefront of what we wanted to do. But batteries was always kind of too large of a jump, right? But as we see some of these other industries adopting those, same thing with fuel cells. Actually, to be honest with you, that's one of the biggest things on fuel cells right now is no different than what we see in the LNG is. Where are you going to get hydrogen from? LNG, where are you going to find it? The infrastructure and the supply chain has to be there first. So that has to be overcome for fuel cells, but for batteries themselves, it's just getting used to the technology, and the price is continuing to drop today as well. So those both together, we're not that far away.
All right. Thank you, David. I'm going to ask a little follow-up on that. Do you feel that as it gets adopted more on the ferry market, that it will eventually start spilling over more into the inland towboats and harbor boats, things like that?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, one of the big things that I always tell people is a ferry market is point A to point B. It's kind of very similar to what an OSB or PSB would be doing, leaving from Port Fourchon out to a rig, right? Not very dynamic, but it's proving that batteries and fuel cells and so forth can work in vessels. People that don't know towboats and tugs, they don't know how dynamic these vessels are, and it's very important to understand that. And with that, these systems were lagging behind what is happening in the ferry market, But the ferry market definitely is driving the adoption of that because it is point A to point B. And it's a lot different low profiles and everything that we'll see, but it will definitely help Worcester on the inland side.